Welcome to CAE Pilot Podcast, a podcast that brings together aviation professionals to discuss life as a pilot, training, and career advice. You can find us at cae.com/CAE Pilot-podcast or subscribe to our show on your audio podcasting platform of choice. You can also find our video podcast on our YouTube channel.
Welcome to this episode of the CAE Pilot Podcast. Today we have something very cool, maybe a bit counterintuitive, but I think it's going to inspire you. Captain Emma's office for the past 11 years has been in the flight deck of an A320. In that time, she's flown over 8,000 hours, has flown VIPs, seen crazy sunsets and sunrises, and the Northern Lights. But she's also had a life revolving around her flying roster, and we all know what that's like. Missing weddings, birthdays, and of course, friends and concerts and all the things that airline people tend to miss. But her life in aviation sort of got interrupted recently, as it did for many people. And while often we discuss how to get back into aviation, Captain Emma's done something a bit different, and she's decided to fold her wings, if you will. And she's taken a voluntary redundancy from the airline she worked for. But she's not really leaving aviation altogether, because she's got a very interesting project called Project Wingman. And I'm not going to spoil the surprise. I'm going to let her talk about it in a bit. Now, you might know Captain Emma from the ITV series Inside the Cockpit. And if you do, you'll want to hear what she has to say today. Captain Emma, welcome to the CAE Pilot Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. It's really great to be here, and it's great to be able to talk to you all today.
We're really happy to have you. Now, we always start off with, some sort of preliminary questions. We always like to know how people got into aviation. How did you fall in love with aviation?
Well, I had a kind of roundabout route into aviation, in that I didn't grow up in a flying family in any way, shape or form. I did really enjoy watching things fly. I was a young ornithologist when I was about 7. I think I joined up for that. And we lived near to Duxford, which is an aviation museum in the southeast of England. And so we used to go there a lot and climb all over the planes and things. And my brother and I would sit in them, and you were allowed to do that then. And we'd sort of pretend we were flying and racing each other and things. So there was an interest there. I did projects at school on flight, but I didn't grow up saying I'm going to be a pilot. So it was really just a series of events that I look back on and realised it was something that I wanted to do. And one of the catalysts, I guess, was seeing the first space shuttle come into Stansted on the back of the 747. It did a tour of the world. And we went along there, and Stansted in those days was just a great big long runway with grass all around it and a shed. And we parked on the grass and went and saw this massive aircraft come in with the space shuttle on the back of it. And I thought, that's it, I need to be an astronaut. And the poster that I bought on that day and had on my bedroom wall for the rest of my childhood is still somewhere in my house, but not up on a wall anymore. But actually, even then, I didn't go to university to become a pilot initially or anything like that. I decided I wanted to be a corporate lawyer working in London, bossing people around in the corporate world. And I really liked that idea. So I actually went to university to study history, with the idea of then doing a law conversion at the end of that. And in my second year, I was walking through the Freshers' Fair, and there was this big poster saying, "Learn to fly for free." And I'd had a flying lesson at 18 for my birthday, but 4 lessons after that. And I thought, oh, that's great. I'll go and learn to fly for free. And it was the University Air Squadron. So that particular branch, I went to Leeds University, and it was Yorkshire University Air Squadron, which I'm sure most people will agree is the best of all the University Air Squadrons in the country. And anyway, I signed up. The next day, I basically got cold feet and pulled my application and said, no, it's not for me, can't do it. And the recruiters came around and said, why have you done that? Please put your application back in. So I did, and passed selection and became an officer cadet on the squadron, which was down at RAF Finningley at the time, which was where all the navigators did their training. And there was a couple of other squadrons as well. So I spent 2 years doing that, learning to fly, being taught by the Air Force, which was amazing. We flew in Bulldogs, Shorts Bulldogs. which are now in museums. And it was an amazing opportunity. But I didn't go on and join the Air Force. I did aptitude tests at Cranwell. But actually, the weekend after I had joined the squadron, I met a boy who has now been my husband for the last 25 years. So my life took a little bit of a different path than I had maybe expected it to. I didn't go on and do the law conversion either. I did do my degree. And when we got married, we moved up to the north of Scotland, where I am now. And I didn't fly again for 8 years. And as part of my husband's military career, we then got a posting to New Zealand. And while we were out there, I took up flying again and gained my PPL, CPL, multi-engine instrument rating. And as we were moving back to the UK, signed up for Bristol Ground School to do the ATPL ground exams, converted all my licenses back to the UK licensing system, and then actually got a scholarship to become an instructor. So what is now the Honourable Company of Air Pilots was then called the Guild of Air Pilots and Air Navigators, and I got a GAPAN Diamond Jubilee scholarship, which has only ever been awarded once, to become a flight instructor. So I did that for 3 years, initially down in High Wycombe and then up in Scotland, and then literally was in the right place at the right time for a training company to open up its application process to do a type rating if you already held a license. And I applied for it, got it, and started with my airline 11 years ago.
It's funny because whenever you ask that question of people, there's a lot of similarities. And one of them, the starting point, obviously, is looking into the sky and seeing something fly, which is, and everybody's got a different path, which I think is interesting for the times we currently find ourselves in. But I think it's interesting to hear that you didn't fly for so many years and then got back into it, which is very neat. Now, when you look at your career, what would you say were some of your best memories?
I've got so many great memories, and you've already alluded to one of them. Seeing the Northern Light in the way that I have done has been a pretty much lifelong ambition. But I've also met some incredible people along the way. While I was going through my flying training in New Zealand, actually, I met a really great guy called Les Munro, who was the last remaining original Dan Busters pilot. And I met and got to know him, which was just such a great privilege. So there's been all kinds of things like that. And it's been things like that. It's the things you see. It's seeing the Atlas Mountains as you go into Marrakesh, and flying down towards Tel Aviv and thinking, wow, this is a really long way away, you know. So the flying that I've done has been restricted to sort of Europe and North Africa kind of area. So I haven't, crossed the date line or anything like that, not in a professional capacity anyway. But it's those things that have made up the most fantastic memories for me. It's the things I've seen and the people I've met.
And what would you say has been the funniest or most bizarre situation you found yourself in?
Well, I think the most bizarre situation I've ever found myself in was a long time ago when I was still a first officer, and we pulled onto stand in Geneva, and nobody came to the aircraft to plug in the headset or move the steps up to the aircraft. And we were sitting there thinking, well, what's going on, And eventually somebody came and said there had been a wildcat strike, ground handling strike announced just then as we landed, and that nobody was going to come and take the bags off or get the passengers off or anything. And we just thought, oh, great, there goes our day then. And actually, we managed to get to a point where the passengers were able to disembark, and we couldn't leave because we couldn't get the bags off the aircraft. So the captain and I, who's a good friend of mine, actually, were walking around the aircraft going, this is ridiculous. There's a cot over there. We could just drive it up to the aircraft, chuck the bags on it, and they can take them away later on, and we can get the passengers on and go back. And we were kind of talking it through, and the captain very wisely said, well, let's just think about this for a minute, shall we? Let's not be too rash. So basically, we managed to persuade someone to drive this baggage cart up to the aircraft. And I went in the hold, and the captain stood at the bottom, and we emptied the hold of all the bags, got them onto the cart, got the new passengers on board, and went back to Stansted, which is where we were operating from. And we were able to complete our day. In fact, no, we didn't go back to Stansted. We went to Leeds. We were on a Leeds W. And what was even better about that was the fact we'd managed to do it. We managed to do the rest of our day, more or less, because by the time we went back to Geneva the second time, the strike had been called off, presumably because we'd ruined it for them. And as we arrived in Leeds, so a couple got off the aircraft who I didn't know had been on board at the time, and they were friends of my in-laws. So it was kind of a good win in the end. But I'll never, ever forget being inside the hold of the aircraft and thinking, not sure we're really meant to be doing this, but we cleared it with the company and checked that we hadn't broken any rules or laws, more importantly. And it was quite not the normal sort of situation I'd expect to see myself in.
Sort of sounds like your first experience in business aviation.
Yeah, it would be a good foray into it, wouldn't it?
What would you say are the biggest challenges you've had in your career?
The biggest challenge by far was failing my first command. And I'm very open about this. I don't see it as being something I shouldn't talk about. I had 6 months off long-term sick, and I came back to work and decided I wasn't going to put myself back into the command process until I was ready. But typically, I wasn't a very good judge at that point of whether or not I was ready, because I wanted to be a captain. And that's something I think I'm not alone in. So I went back into the process, got through the assessments and went on to the command course. And for various reasons, and one of which, not the least of which, was that I simultaneously slipped 3 discs in the middle of my back during a sim. And then managed to carry on and do another sim, which I then failed. And that just led to this whole process where I just didn't make it through the rest of the course. I think my mojo had gone and I wasn't ready for it. And it was heartbreaking and crushing all at the same time. And really, really difficult. And I spent a week after that thinking, right, I'm never going to fly again. That's it. Game over. It's not for me. And then I thought, well, I'll fly again, but I'm not going to fly for the same airline again because it's just too embarrassing. It's too humiliating. And of course, in the end, I went back to the same airline, and I spent a year back in the right-hand seat of the aircraft. I had some amazing instructors and trainers who got me through that process and were just very, very gentle and sensitive. I completely took on board all my mistakes and the errors that I'd made. And I reckon I had the best year of my flying life sitting in the right-hand seat, knowing that I hadn't been ready the first time and preparing myself for the second time when I completed a successful command course. But that was a really, really big deal for me because I had got all the way to 43 and never failed anything in my life before. And suddenly I felt like I'd failed myself and my family, and it was really, really difficult to cope with. But I found that actually by owning it and being honest about it, it was a really, it turned out to be a really positive experience actually in the end.
Must be very liberating to be open about something and not feel that you have to cover it up somehow or be embarrassed by it.
Well, there's nothing to be embarrassed by, is there? And, you know, it's okay to say I got that wrong. And I think you grow that way. And I think that you really need to take control of things like that because it will eat you up otherwise. I could have spent the last 4 years blaming everybody else for why I didn't pass my command the first time round, or the last five and a half years now. But that wouldn't have got me anywhere. In fact, it probably wouldn't have got me through the second command course.
And in the meantime, you've probably helped a ton of people too.
Absolutely. And because I have been very open and honest about it, people have often come to me and said, could you talk to this person and just help them through this or give them some guidance because they're coming up to their command? And I've happily done it because if people can learn from my mistakes, that's even better because then they haven't had to go through the heartache I had to go through. Right. And I was lucky enough to be able to book a holiday to Malta shortly afterwards and literally spent 2 weeks sitting by the pool thinking I just don't want to have anything to do with the rest of the world ever again, and sort of was able to then come back licking my wounds much more gently.
But as you say, in 2016, you did become a captain. And given your experience, what advice would you have for future captains who are listening right now? What tips would you give them?
Well, first of all, I'd say don't rush into it because that was my mistake, really. You might be rushing into it because you're early on in your career and you think it's the only thing that you need to do, but you're sitting in that left-hand seat for a very long time. So actually another year here or there is going to stand you in good stead and build more experience. So there's no pressure to become a captain as young as you can be. You know, you want to be good when you get into that seat. And that doesn't mean necessarily that you're the best pilot in the world. I think it means that perhaps that you might be a more empathetic person or a better at self-criticism or something like that. But the best bit of advice really that I'd pass on is what was told to me years ago, which is just choose 2 captains you really love flying with and think about why you love flying with them and try and emulate that as much as possible.
Wow, that's great. That's great advice.
Yeah, I think I definitely took that on board. And the other advice is take 2 captains you don't enjoy flying with, think about why, and don't be them. And think about why you don't like flying with them. What do they do that winds you up? If it's everybody, then it's you, not them. But if there are 2 people you can think of, that would definitely be a way of avoiding things that are not going to make you a good captain.
It's very elegant advice just because of its simplicity, really.
Well, it was, I can't claim it because it was advice that was given to me by other people, but I definitely followed it and I think it was worth it.
And what would you say was your favorite aviation moment?
I think there are lots of favourite moments, really, because I have loved my job so much. But one of my favourite moments, I think, has got to be landing on the Isle of Man, which is a really short runway, on a filthy night in almost close to max crosswind conditions, and knowing that I was about the only aircraft that had got in that day. And it's times like that when you've really risen to the challenge and got the passengers to where they want to go. And also you can kind of walk away and think, yeah, I did that. That's all right. I'm okay with that. So
that's your badge of honor then.
I was very well, especially as I hadn't been to the Isle of Man before as well, even as it just proves that a runway is a runway, really, doesn't it? But those sorts of times when you've done a good job like that, they've been definitely my favourite moments out of the last 11 years.
Now, you're also known for the ITV series Inside the Cockpit, where people know you're bubbly and funny, down to earth. Everybody knows you for that. How did it come about that you became part of that show?
Well, the company had done that show already. They'd done the first series that hadn't gone quite as they had hoped. And one of my colleagues and friends was in that series, and she had recommended me to the people within the company that were organising it in the PR. And they approached me and asked if I'd be interested. And I kind of said, yeah, why not? I was comfortable that I was doing the kind of job I wanted to do as a captain. And I thought, well, if I don't like it, I can tell them I don't want to be part of it anymore. And so that's what happened. And pretty much a week after I agreed to do it, they were filming. So
what's it like to do your job and to be followed by a camera crew? I think we all watch reality TV, but what's it like to be at the center of it?
I loved it. I loved every single moment of it, actually. And I guess I've wanted for a long time. I really wanted to show people what we do at work, because you can't have your family in the flight deck anymore like you used to in the old days, So I've never been able to show anybody that I know what I actually do in my job. And so it was a fantastic opportunity to showcase that. But also I think I've never really shied away from being the centre of attention, I guess. So it was kind of a double whammy for me. I was like, yeah, great. Come and film me doing my job. This is brilliant. Why wouldn't I do that? And I just loved every minute of it. It was just a really amazing experience. And I met some really cool people as a result of it as well. So,
were there times where you wished the camera crew wasn't there?
No, because they were lovely. And I got to know my crew really well. So most of the time we had a dedicated camera crew. And on the odd occasion they couldn't be there, so you'd have someone else, but they were still great. But actually, no, they were great because they were very clear from the very beginning. They said, if anything happens where you don't want us to film, just tell us and we won't film. And actually, in the program, there's a clip of a passenger who collapsed into my arms, and I told them to turn the cameras off after that, because it was wrong to be filming something like that. And they turned them off, and that was great. And had anything happened during a flight that I didn't want to have filmed, I had the ability to say to them, please don't use that, and they wouldn't have done. So, and actually the only time I had to say that to them was when I discovered on the way up to Iceland that the camera I had taken to take photos of the Northern Lights, knowing there was a chance of seeing them, the camera had run out of battery, and so I couldn't use it. And I just said to them, do you know what, don't show me not having a battery in my camera, please, you know. So I should add that I did have permission from the director of flight ops to have a camera in the flight deck for that occasion, before anyone wonders.
And you had a lot of different things, like dealing with passengers who were drunk, and you mentioned the lady passing out, the Northern Lights, but you also had a time where there was confusion over taxiways at Schiphol in Amsterdam.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
But was this a moment that eventually aired?
Absolutely, yeah. So that aired, and it was part of the program, and I got a lot of banter for it from people. My brother still sends me socks with left and right on for Christmas, which is hilarious. But yeah, it happened, but it didn't happen in quite the way it was described on the program, as I'm sure you can imagine.
Were you nervous, though, that something like that would portray you in the wrong way? Like, to me, it says, okay, even a pilot is human, right? I mean, anybody who knows pilots knows they're human beings, right? So to me, that's a human moment. But it's interesting to hear you say that, I had complete control over what was aired and what wasn't, yet you still allowed the camera crew to see the human behind the machine, or that's not really what I want to say, but the human, like, that you are human.
Yeah, no, I mean, to be clear, I didn't have control over what was aired. It was more the case that if something like really bad had happened, right, I would have been able to then say, no, you're not to use that. So the example is, I don't think it's right to film a passenger when they're clearly unwell, because that's not right to make TV out of that.
Right.
So I was able to stop things like that. But no, when I signed up to it, I knew that it was going to be warts and all. Actually, that occasion, it was literally just confusion between the two of us about which roundabout we were supposed to go round in Amsterdam, which is quite a confusing airport anyway. And we ended up in exactly the right place, that the controller in the tower wanted us to be in that place, but we were just facing a different direction. So all we did was go round the roundabout a different way. And when we left to taxi onto stand, we just went round the roundabout a different way, which didn't affect any traffic. And it didn't actually happen in exactly the way that it was portrayed on the program, as you can imagine. And I just took it because, it was one of those moments. I might have watched it from behind a cushion, cringing a little bit. But overall, I was happy that I came across in the way I largely wanted to show people that, yes, I'm as professional as I can be at every moment, but I am a human being. I enjoy my job, and I like to look after the people I work with. So, I kind of thought, there's always going to be something like that. It doesn't make good TV if nothing ever happens, so I was happy to take that. And we did get an email from the controller after it aired saying, I just want you to know that I wasn't bothered in the slightest about what happened, and if you'd ever like to come and visit us in the tower here at Schiphol, I'd love to see you. So
well, that's really great. That's a nice story.
Yeah, it was really nice. Yeah, really nice.
And we've seen you addressing passengers directly on the PA from the cabin itself, which is kind of rare, I think. I mean, I was a flight attendant for many years, and I can think of maybe some delays where the captain came out and sort of spoke in front of the cabin, but not often. Why did you think it's important, or what draws you to, or drew you to, make PA announcements from the cabin?
Well, I decided when I got my command that that was something I wanted to do. And it kind of achieves a couple of things for me. So firstly, it meant that I was able to connect with my passengers in a way that I can't do if I stay behind a locked door. And that allows me to do a couple of things. It allows me to show a percentage of nervous passengers that there is on every flight. Roughly 10% of passengers on every flight are uncomfortable in some way with what they're doing. So firstly, it shows people that there's a human being sitting at the front who has come out to say hello, and it just sets people at ease. It means that there's maybe fewer people that are feeling a bit uncomfortable by the time you've spoken to them. But the other thing it does is it allowed me to, the other thing it did is it allowed me to gauge the mood in the cabin. So, you know, if it was a delay, for me, it was obvious that if there was a delay, then I'd go out and speak, because it would allow me to see how people were feeling about that. And depending on the destination would really determine how people were feeling about it. But it might not be a delayed flight. It might be just a very busy, rowdy flight to a party destination. And it just allows you to kind of make sure you're connecting with the passengers in a way that says, I'm here and I'm really going to look after you, and please just make sure you behave yourselves. And I have actually been able to sort of stop the PA and say, actually, guys, I really need you to listen to me, because if you don't listen to me, you won't listen to the safety demonstration, and that's something I need to know you've heard. And suddenly you find all these sort of lads generally will sort of then sit there and go, oh, okay then. And it gave me the ability to look after my crew in that way as well.
Well, I think having been a cabin crew member myself, I think that definitely when you know the captain is behind you, you're right that there is a certain, it's support, right? It's just showing that you are there. And I think you're right too. There is a mood in the cabin. I always, when I was flying, always thought to myself, well, I always thought of it more as the beginning of a movie, like setting the stage for something that was to come. And I haven't thought about it in a long time, but it's true that there's a certain mood and that you would act. You knew if you could be funny. You knew if you could, if this was going to be serious or what. And I never thought about it from the standpoint of the pilots who sort of are cut off from that, especially, with, the flight deck door being locked and what's not. So it's an interesting...
Well, there's potential for a massive disconnect between you and your crew because of the door. And you've got to find ways of breaking that door down, essentially, and making sure that you are able to communicate with your crew members and your passengers in a way that shows them that you really are there to do a good job for all of them, because at the end of the day, you're doing a good job for the passengers, but you're also doing a good job for the crew, your crew members, because they're the ones that are going to help you run your day in the way that it needs to go. And actually, they're the ones that make you tea as well. So it's kind of important that you look after them.
The other thing I find super cool about you doing that is that we know that only, about 5% of pilots are women. And I think when you're standing up there in front of everyone making an announcement, you're showing little girls, not just little girls, but women in general, that this is a profession that they can reach the top of too. I think that's Absolutely. Inspirational. And did you ever have any comments about that? Did anyone ever, I remember once when I was flying, an older lady was coming home from London, said to her husband, "Oh, look, it's a male stewardess." And clearly in her mind, there was a gender role that assigned to that particular job. And I'm just wondering if you had any funny anecdotes with respect to that.
Oh, yeah, all the time. I mean, actually, I found quite often, because I'd obviously go out to say goodbye to people at the end as well. And quite often you'd find people would want to say something, but they wouldn't necessarily know exactly what to say. So there'd be a lot of well dones, and you'd kind of go, thanks, I've been flying for a long time. But you have to take those comments. Yeah, exactly. But you have to take those comments graciously, because actually what the person's trying to do is say, I'm acknowledging the fact that you are a woman and you're doing something I wouldn't normally expect a woman to be doing. So you'd get those kind of comments. Sometimes there'd be something cheeky and I'd give a fairly cheeky response. But actually sometimes as well, there'd be people who'd get off. A lady said to me one day that her daughter, she'd taken a photo of me doing the welcome on board PA, and she said, I'm going to show this to my daughter because she wants to be a pilot, and I want to show her that she can do that, because she can see you. And I just thought that's kind of cool that maybe a little girl, actually a little girl or a little boy could grow up and understand that a girl can be a pilot in the same way as a boy can be a flight attendant, or there should be no issue with gender when it comes to our jobs.
Absolutely. I think it's super cool. Now, we're talking about aviation. You were clearly passionate about it, and then all of a sudden, earlier this year, you give it up. What was behind that
Along
decision?
came COVID. Yeah. Well, there are lots of reasons for my decision to step back. I could see the writing on the wall for the airlines really when COVID hit in the UK. I could see that if there was ever any sort of recovery to the place that we were at the beginning of this year, it was going to take a long time, or that's what I felt. And I felt really sad on what turned out to be my last flight ever. I felt really sad because it felt like something big was about to happen. And then, of course, we had lockdown, and I really liked it. My children were at home and the weather was nice, and I didn't have to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't come home at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was sleeping well and spending time with the family, which, my memories of that are probably slightly rosier than my young adult daughter's memories. I think they probably thought I should have gone back to work. But, I think I realised for a while that, the commute from where I live to where I work, it's a 600-mile commute, which I was doing weekly, and it takes its toll on you. And actually, for the last 11 years, there's only been 2 of those years when I haven't had a big commute of some sort, whether it's a flight or a drive. So in the end, commuting was always going to be what stopped me from working for my airline. But I never could have imagined it was going to be now. But I think that just, that time away from the job and the fact that my commute's no longer viable because there's not the flights that there were. So it would just mean a lot of time away from home. A number of other things that made me sort of finalise the decision, really. I mean, firstly, by taking voluntary redundancy, that has allowed 2 other people to keep their jobs at 50%. So, for me, that's an absolute win. But, I'm in a very lucky position that I'm not the breadwinner. We're not going to face any financial difficulties by me stepping back from working. So that does put me in a different position than some people. We've reached a stage of our lives where our children have all finally gone to the last one's now gone to university. So, I don't really get why I would spend the next 10 years of my life married to someone I never see because I'm always away working. And really, that's what it came down to in the end. Was I had an opportunity to look at whether or not I wanted to carry on. I would have liked to have carried on for a lot longer under normal circumstances, but these are not normal circumstances. And I have to keep reminding myself that, because sometimes I think, what are you doing? You've walked away from a job you didn't just love, but you adored and lived, And I have to remind myself that I'm not walking away from a job under normal circumstances, making a lifestyle choice under extreme circumstances, when actually we don't know what the future of the aviation industry is going to be like. So this way, I leave with a little bit of money behind me. I'm in complete control of it, and all the pressure is off. I don't have to worry about the commute or think about the next sim check or do the next tech quiz or anything like that. The pressure's all gone. And I've had 11 amazing and glorious years, and now's the right time. It's better to leave now while I still enjoy it than I think. It's like a holiday. You should leave when you still want to stay.
And I imagine that making this decision, not that it was an easy decision, but given that you had taken a pause from flying previously, where you'd spent those 8 years not flying, did the idea that, if the timing's right, another time I can just get back into it, did that play into your decision-making at all?
Yeah, I guess if the right opportunity comes along at the right time in the future, of course I can go back into it. I'm not planning on keeping my license current, because I think the chances of me getting a job on an A320 again in the immediate future without having to do the commute that is one of the reasons I've stopped doing it is almost impossible. There might be other opportunities that come in the future, but if they don't come along, then I'm happy with the fact that I've had 11 amazing years and the things I've done and the things I've seen. There's nothing else I really feel I need to achieve. I would like to have carried on for longer if I could have done, but I can't. So actually, why waste the next few years worrying about something that you can't do anymore? Why not just say, okay, I'm only 47. I can still do other things and I can still throw myself into other things and be very happy doing something else. So that's what I'm going to do.
And that's exactly what you've done.
Absolutely.
And you haven't left aviation completely. You've actually found a way to get furloughed pilots and cabin crew together for a great initiative. So tell us about Project Wingman.
Yeah, so as the wall of COVID approached us and we started to all understand what it was going to have on our lives, there were two things that were very obvious to me, and I'd been sort of spending some time sort of in the weeks up to when we finally locked down, thinking to myself, there's so many of us in the airline industry, we must be able to help the NHS in some way, because it just is, for me, it was a no-brainer. I wasn't exactly sure how, but I knew there must be a way that we could help. And I'm a peer mentor. I was a peer mentor in my company. And through the peer mentor scheme, I was introduced to somebody else in another airline who had had similar thoughts. So we kind of put our heads together and came up with this idea of providing wellbeing support to the NHS, to NHS frontline workers. And we were able to put together a very simple program to take into hospitals and offer tea and empathy, basically, was the offer in lounges away from patients. So it was providing frontline staff with just a space that was different from their workspace, where they could go and sit down and have a cup of tea made for them for once, rather than them doing all the caring, and where they could just talk about their day and unload their burdens if they wanted to. So, and a lot of the time people would come in to the lounges and they want to talk about flying and holidays and things like that. So it was great because basically we had uniformed professionals, and it was flight deck and flight attendants as well. So it was air crew, not just pilots, and uniformed professionals going into a professional environment, but from a different working environment, to say, look, we're here. We understand the pressures that you are facing, or we're trying to understand them. And guess what? We work in a similar environment and we have experience that can help you. And it just snowballed beyond our wildest dreams, to be honest with you.
That's what I was going to say. You talk about it as if there's a few uniformed professionals who are doing this, but the reality is it's 5,000 volunteers that you've got. And you call them lounges, but everything in aviation we have to find a name for. But I understand they were considered first-class lounges. And that was at
so the first
70
class
hospitals.
Yeah, well, we had, I think, 5,500 crew, and we've got over 80 hospitals we've been represented in. We've had pop-up lounges as well. And the first-class lounge idea came from the fact that the British public were so incredibly generous with donations to hospitals, which is wonderful. But the hospitals were then like, well, how do we distribute this stuff? And the ones that we went into, they were able to say, well, can you help us to distribute the 8,000 tons worth of chocolate that we've been delivered? And so we were able to do that. So but it wasn't just chocolate. It was things like beauty packs and soft drinks and all sorts of other things that would just make life nicer for people who sometimes were spending long periods of time staying in the hospital away from home so that they could protect their families and protect the people they were caring for. So actually, those seemingly small acts had a massive impact on the lives of people that were basically keeping the country alive.
And I think that cabin crew and pilots are very resourceful people, right? Because once the door is closed, the only thing you have is what you have. And
absolutely.
when presented with, I always think about it from a crew perspective, but we're short meals or whatever it was, and you just find a way to make it happen, and no one ever goes hungry, and we always find a way to do it. And so I think this is such an amazing way to use those talents, but I think too it's the perfect fit.
Definitely, because people can be problem solvers. So absolutely, you're sort of suddenly thrown into a new environment which is a hospital you're unfamiliar with staff you're unfamiliar with, and all kinds of things will come out of that. And it might be that you turn up one day and there's no milk, or there's no cups, or there's been a flood, or whatever. All the things that can happen can just as easily happen on an aircraft. You're missing something. So you just find a way to work around it to make sure that you're looking after the people you're there to look after. It's almost identical, and actually it's allowed many of our redundant crew to actually find paid employment in the NHS, because the NHS has looked to our crews and said, actually, there's a skill set there that we desperately need. Let's employ aircrew. Which is a fantastic idea, by the way, to anyone who's watching. Employ aircrew, because they have loads of transferable skills.
Well, not the least of which they've got very extensive first aid training, and you're right. It's massively transferable.
Absolutely. And by the way, we had 2 lounges in New York. Did you know that?
No, I didn't. I only had the paragraphs that Renault had sent, but I think...
Yeah, so we managed to set up 2 lounges. We had Wingman USA for just 2 lounges, but it was amazing. Wow.
And I bet you don't realize, while you're helping, the healthcare workers, you're also helping those crew members who, instead of sitting at home and dealing with the COVID-19 that we've all dealt with, and the mental or the well-being issues that the people who've been home and without work have had, you've managed to get people involved in something that makes them feel fulfilled at a time when they need it most.
Absolutely. Yeah, very much so. And actually that includes myself. Project Wingman came along and has given people a sense of purpose. So for the crew that are in lounges, it's given them structure to a day that otherwise would have had none, because they've had to be somewhere at a certain time. They've had to put their uniform on. They've had that mixing with other crew members that we all crave as crew. And okay, they might not all be from the same airline, but actually you all do the same job. So you have a shared knowledge base, and you might do things slightly differently. But it's been amazing actually to see the number. I mean, every airline that's represented in the UK has been involved in some way. Crew members from every airline, even if they're not UK-based airlines. So we have crews from airlines all over the world who are involved in our lounges because they're here and they're able to help, which has been absolutely fantastic.
And I think it's fantastic, but it's been recognized at the highest levels in the UK as well, if I'm not mistaken.
It has, yeah. That was a really amazing surprise, actually. We had been mentioned, my local MP had mentioned us in the House of Commons, and not very long after that we were contacted by the department, a government department, about an award called a Points of Light Award. So we were given a Points of Light certificate, and along with that came a letter from the Prime Minister saying, on behalf of the nation, I'd like to thank you for all the hard work you're doing. And that was kind of I think that was probably the first moment that I realised that all the work I'd been putting in over lockdown and the furlough time had actually led to something quite big. Because I think when you're doing it every day, you just, you have your meetings and you sort out the problems and you go on to the next thing and you just go, yep, done that. And you're building the relationships all the time. I think sometimes you don't then step back from it and look at how big an achievement it is. And that was definitely a kind of a signpost to the size of achievement that, let's face it, yes, I'm sitting here receiving the award, but actually that award was for the 5,500 crew that were going into the lounges day after day and giving their time to support our NHS colleagues.
I'm sure you found a way to share that with everyone too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely,
awesome.
we did, yeah.
Well, listen, I applaud you. I think it's so fantastic that you were able to sort of find a way to put everybody to work for the good of, frankly, the people that were being served and the people who were, doing it. It's I don't even know what to say. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you.
What do you think you'll miss most from flying?
Well, I think I'll definitely miss the seeing the people that I loved working with. And obviously some of them have become friends that I'll be in touch with for the rest of my life. But some of them, I might not even have their phone numbers or, remember when we flew together, but we had a great day out. So it's all the people that go into your day, basically. And also, I'm sure it sounds a bit corny, but actually those people, particularly in my airline, are like family. It really is a very supportive, lovely place to work. Everybody is just keen to help each other out and make sure that everything works well for each other. So I will miss that. I think in terms of actually flying, I think the thing I'll miss the most, one of my favourite things was to be sitting at the end of the runway at Gatwick at dusk, about to get a takeoff clearance to fly up to Inverness, which is home, obviously, knowing that I was on a night stop and I'd be coming home for the night. And, rolling down the runway and thinking, yeah, I've managed to complete my day successfully enough that I've managed to get off to Inverness in time to get to land and the airport not be closed. So, yeah, that's always a bit of a winner, especially in the summer. But they're the times I'll miss. But there's lots of things I won't miss. And, I won't miss the late nights and the early mornings and things like that. But, yeah, the things I'll miss are just great. They're great memories that I'll always have. And, of course, I'm really lucky that I've got the 2 episodes of Inside the Cockpit to remind me of what I used to do. I can actually sit and watch myself doing it if I want to. So, I'm kind of lucky to have that.
And with any luck, Project Wingman will sort of fade, if not disappear once, the pandemic is done. So what are your other projects?
Well, actually, interestingly, I think Project Wingman will continue for some time to come because we've got legacy lounges across the country and we're in the process of ramping up a launch of a mobile lounge in the form of a double-decker bus that we're going to tour around the country, bringing well-being to other parts. So that's something that's going to keep us very busy. And I'm really looking forward to being able to formally launch that, actually. But, for me, there are things that I have really loved to do in the past that I'm now able to sort of resurrect. So, firstly, I just live in a really beautiful place. So just having time to enjoy that is great. But I set up, a few years ago, I set up a little business selling prints of paintings that I have done. And they're on, prints, mugs, aprons, that kind of thing. And that's been relatively successful. But I've never had the time to put into it that I've got now. So I'm going to be pursuing that and seeing if I can basically make enough of a living out of doing something else that I love. And, my ideal would be to basically just do that and things like, the gardening that I have enjoyed doing so much over the last 6 months as well. But ultimately, Wingman is going to take up quite a lot of my time still for the near future. My business that I'm working on even more now. Ultimately, I'm going to end up doing something, I think, that will help other people in the long run. I don't know what it is yet. I've got some quite big ideas. I just need to work out how feasible they are. And my biggest idea is to create a community garden where people with mental health needs can come and spend their time and help to deal with their mental health issues. And I think we're going to see a bigger need for that as time goes on and we all deal with the fallout of what we've just been through and what we're about to face. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think that wellness, and it's nice to hear that it's going to continue and that it's not a temporary thing, but I think wellness is, they've often said it's the second wave of this, and clearly it's an important part of what we've all gone through.
We've all got to look after each other, and that's the bottom line, isn't it?
Absolutely. We always ask one last question at the end, and it might seem a bit funny coming from where you are at this point, but what would you say to young pilots who are maybe now at the academy or people who were, really hunting for their first airline job. Clearly, we've been through this crisis, and a pilot shortage has quickly turned its course completely. But what words of encouragement would you have for someone who is, at the beginning of their career or hoping to have a career?
Well, first of all, I think I'd say don't give up, because it's not your fault that this has happened at a time in your career that you should be just starting out in your first job. So just don't give up hope, because, these things, not necessarily on this scale, but things like this come along every now and again. And the aviation industry will recover in some shape or form. So definitely don't give up. But I would say as well, don't take your career for granted, because actually I think none of us could have ever imagined that we would be in a position where the career that we've worked so hard for would just disappear. We might think, oh yeah, I'll go to a different airline, but for the whole lot to just disappear, none of us could have imagined. And I think those people that come out of this the most successfully are going to be the ones who've got something else to do. Because don't forget, it's not just the airline industry that could be putting you in this position. It could be a medical that you could fail, or it could be any number of things that could mean that for some reason you can't fly anymore for a while. So I think have something else to do that you love, or at least you don't hate, and then you're never going to be in a position where you feel helpless. Because when you step away from this industry, whether it's by choice like me or whether you're told you need to step away from it, there's going to be a period of time where you feel a bit adrift in the sea. And that has applied to me as well. I'm at peace with my decision, absolutely. But don't think for 1 minute it was an easy decision that I don't care about. I've put a lot of thought into this, and I've shed some tears over it as well, So just have other things you can tolerate that you might actually end up then loving, because that way you will be able to think, you'll be able to have a future, and you'll be able to have hope for what's going to happen next. You're not going to end up in a situation where you just think, I genuinely don't know what I'm going to get out of bed for every day. There'll always be something. So that would be, I think, my biggest piece of advice is always have something else up your sleeve.
And I think people need to look at your career path as well to say that not every pilot ends up in the flight deck the same way. That there can be gaps,
Absolutely.
That there can be long gaps, that there are other things to do. There are things connected to the industry that they can do, as you've demonstrated with Project Wingman. So I think you're quite inspirational for people right now.
Oh, bless you. Thank you. Well, I hope if one person can be inspired by seeing what I've done and what we've done at Wingman, then the whole thing's worth it,
And I think you can rest assured that that's the case. Emma, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I think it's
been a pleasure talking to you too, Patrick. Thank you so much. It's been really nice to meet you.
The same here. And I want to remind everyone that they can go to airside.aero for lots of great tools for pilots looking to get back into the sky. There's the resume builder there. There's this podcast, lots of great articles. Airside.aero, go check it out. Thanks again, Emma.
Thanks very much, Patrick. See you again.
Take care.
CAE Pilot Podcast is brought to you by CAE, the global leader in training for the civil aviation, defense and security, and healthcare markets. For more information, check out cae.com.